Hey everybody, welcome on in to Sports Live in the 215. Today we'll discuss the Eagles trading Bryce Huff to the 49ers for a mid-round pick. I'm on record as saying I thought the Bryce Huff signing would have been the Eagles' best signing last offseason. That turned out to unfortunately not be the case, and I think it's primarily due to the player the the contract that the player was signed to, calling for him to be put in a bigger role, and he couldn't live up to it for whatever reason, and it sucks um, for the Eagles. But I mean, to have your biggest free agent signing of last offseason be a flop and still win the Super Bowl shows just how good of an offseason last year truly was. Like everything else other than Bryce Huff broke pretty much perfectly for the Eagles. So um, yeah, on that front, they made out okay, and like I they definitely have guys in Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, um, no, Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, and um, Josh Uche, to kind of um pick up the slack in Bryce Huff's absence, although Bryce Huff didn't um didn't do much of anything of note last year except just basically be on the phantom the phantom IR list uh toward the playoff run. Like he I it's to the point where like I almost forgot that he was even on the roster. And you think a player that signed a 3-year contract worth $51 million, um, like you think you'd remember that player that player's on their team, but the Eagles just did not miss him, and he just did not he didn't vibe with Vic Fangio for whatever reason, and I think it was because with the Jets, why they used him so effectively is he was essentially a mercenary. Like on third down, second and long, like he could just focus on rushing the quarterback. And when you pay a guy 3 years, 51 million, you're not expecting him to solely be a pass rush specialist. Like, and he was absolutely putrid against the run. Um, that's why when he got hurt, you saw Nolan Smith get more opportunities. You saw Jalen Hunt get more opportunities, and BG when he got back in the Super Bowl, I want to say he played like 10 to 15 snaps, and that was Brandon Graham coming off a torn tricep injury, or a triceps injury. So and arguably he was even better than Bryce Huff. Um, if if a 34, 35-year-old Brandon Graham is better than a 25-year-old arguably in his prime defensive lineman, so, something something just went horribly wrong. And yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what happens in the NFL. Like you make a big signing and it ends up being a flop. But most teams, when that happens to, like most teams that happens to, it doesn't that season doesn't result in them winning a Super Bowl. So it just goes to show how what an incredible offseason last year was, and hopefully this time next year we're talking about some similar things. But time will tell if that happens. I just think that I think that it sucks. That was really honestly my first like real hot take since I started I started this podcast, that Bryce Huff would be their most their most impactful signing. But yeah, it didn't work out, and I've paid for it all of last year for sure. It was just it was again a case of the player just not fitting what his coordinator wanted, and yeah, I mean with every other move the Eagles made, like it worked out in spades, and I don't think, even with as big of a flop as Huff was, I don't think you could script literally a more perfect offseason for the Eagles, even with having one of the biggest free agent flops in franchise history. Like it's honestly crazy. Like um just the fact that everything else went perfectly, and it resulted in a team that was so connected, so bought in, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl. Um, so yeah, that's a credit to everybody in the Eagles organization: Nick Sirianni, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, on down. Like everybody just pitched in, and what was a part of this Super Bowl run. I think that was maybe one of the most dominant NFL teams of all time. Like I think I I don't think Saquon was far off when he said on the Exciting Mike's podcast that that oh my god, I'm choking. Jeez. When he said on the Exciting Mike's podcast that the 2024 Eagles were top five team of all time, and that's with arguably the worst, probably the worst free agent signing in my lifetime. Just just the amount of expectations that were placed on Bryce, and he didn't live up. Saying he didn't live up to him would be putting it as mildly as I possibly could. He was such a non-factor. I almost like my brother was joking when we were watching. I forget what game it was, but he was like, I think it might have been, was it Carolina, but it was one of the games where he was like, I legitimately forgot Bryce Huff was on the roster, and like yeah, unfortunately, I think most of Philadelphia did. But it's just it, it just it just sucks having your your biggest free agent signing in terms of like overall like monetary value just not really do anything for you is just absolutely, it leaves a terrible taste in your mouth. But I'll take a Super Bowl ring, even if it means one bad free agent signing for sure. Um yeah, I just wanted to kind of get on here and quickly dissect the Bryce Huff trade for the Eagles and the 49ers. They're getting a guy. They're honestly getting a guy in that NASCAR package along with Nick Bosa and the defensive tackle they just drafted, and I think he's gonna be a really good piece for them, for the San Francisco 49ers, because he's gonna be in a role that he's comfortable with, and he's gonna their defense is gonna be coordinated by Robert Saleh, who Bryce Huff had his best year when Robert Saleh was the head coach of the Jets. So I think it could end up being a good trade for both sides, and yeah, I want to thank you guys for listening to this. And as always, go Birds.